This is Fox 5 News Morning.
Michael Brown, Eric Garner, now Martise Johnson. We just keep hearing talks of controversial encounters that black men have had with police officers. Question is, can young men who are being stopped and questioned by police officers do anything to make sure their situations don't escalate? One local lawyer says yes, and he's written a book about it. He joins us ahead at 8:30.
Comply now, contest later. That's what our next guest says is the key to surviving police encounters.
He's written a guide for men to keep officer interactions from escalating into violence. We'll chat with him coming up next to see how you can benefit from this as well. It is 8:27.
Well, you are no doubt familiar with this by now, but you're looking at video that shows a UVA student who happens to be an African American getting violently arrested last week after being denied entrance into a bar. Now, the owner of that bar in Charlottesville, Virginia, is shedding light on this incident. He contradicts what officers say happened here. The bar owner says that the 20-year-old student here, Martise Johnson, tried to enter his pub on Wednesday night, but was not allowed inside because he thought that he had a fake ID. He went on to say that this young man, Johnson, was cordial and respectful, did not appear to be intoxicated. Again, that contradicts the story from officers who arrested Johnson after he left the bar. And, well, that video there is the result of them taking him down. They claim he was belligerent. They claim he was drunk. Johnson needed 10 stitches in his head as a result of the arrest. Virginia State Police are now investigating this incident. And joining us today is Eric Broyles. Now, Eric is an attorney and an entrepreneur and the co-author of this new book. It's called Encounters with Police, A Black Man's Guide to Survival. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
We should say you co-authored this with a police officer.
I did.
As well. And before we move on to this case of this young man and what all people need to be aware of, let me ask you about that police officer. Sure. Does he say that there is an issue with racial profiling and the police?
He has mentioned that there is a small minority of police officers who do not follow their training or follow the rules, but it is not the vast majority of police officers. It's one of the points we try to get across in this book.
Right.
In hopes that we can help people to put these incidents into perspective. There are few bad actors, but the results are pretty intense for the community. And so, as a result, we try to give some pointers on helping to sort of de-escalate these situations. But by and large, most police officers do not engage in bad conduct like this. But for the few who do,
right,
the consequences are bad. And we actually give pointers on how to ferret out those bad police officers.
Again, most are good.
Yes.
Most are good. All right. Before we go on to general advice, if you will, let's talk about this UVA student. You happen to yourself be a UVA Cavalier.
I am.
You're going to address the student body?
I'll be down at the law school on March the 30th. I'm actually going to St. Louis before then, but at the law school on March 30th, addressing the Black Student Association, the Black Law Students Association.
This is the latest in, unfortunately, what seems to be a string of incidents highlighting those bad actors, if you will, within a larger force. What do you think about this case, this Martise Johnson case?
Well, there are a few, we don't know all the facts yet, but as I understand the facts from my sources down at the university, this does appear to be a situation where these ABC officers overreached and definitely went too far. We don't know what preceded him being slammed to the ground and the injury that occurred. And then there's a whole separate issue of whether or not these ABC officers should have police authorities at all.
Let's talk about some of the points that you bring up in the book. It's really written with practical tips.
Yes.
So that people understand their rights.
Right.
Can you explain more about the book?
Sure. The theme of our book is to comply now and to contest later.
Okay.
The objective is to help, in particular, African-American men, but these tips are race neutral, race and gender neutral.
It's for all of us.
It's for everyone.
Okay.
The idea is to place the police stop or the police encounter into its proper context. If something bad happens during that encounter, the best thing to do is to address it in a different form. And what we're trying to do is give, in particular, African-American men, a different form to express their rightful frustration at what appears to be targeting, and hostility towards them, and bias. And so we explained to them during the complaint process, you actually start to build a paper trail, which will help the police departments ferret out who the bad actors are. Can you imagine if Officer Darren Wilson in Ferguson had 5 written complaints on him prior to the Michael Brown incident? Might the grand jury have viewed his actions differently?
Why black men in the title here?
Well, because I think recent events show that black men are probably more at risk. And I would argue that this is, I wouldn't necessarily couch it in terms of overt racism, but certainly unconscious bias. In our society, the way black men have been portrayed in media and some of the stereotypes that are deeply ingrained in us, all of us have unconscious bias, in particular towards African Americans. Even blacks have unconscious bias. And so what that leads to is like the situation in South Carolina when an officer tells LeVar Jones, reach into your vehicle to get me your license. When he reaches in and he moves a little too fast, he gets shot. And he's shot because this sort of trigger inside of this officer said, this man, he's a black man, he's probably going to do something to hurt me. He has a propensity to engage in violent activity. And so we target this book to black men because we feel they are more at risk for these type of situations. We feel that we understand their frustrations. I myself have been pulled over and have been racially profiled. And so my best friend and I, who's a police officer, we've talked about these issues for 20+ years.
So you're in the car, you get pulled over, you've done nothing wrong.
Right.
That little birdie inside of your head says, I've done nothing wrong, so why not just speak my mind here? A lot of your book talks about swallowing your pride in that moment, so you get home. In the encounter, then later you perhaps start that paper trail or file a complaint or what have you. How difficult, though, is it to swallow your pride in that moment?
Well, look, our objective is to get you home. And you have to ask yourself, what is the cost to me expressing my anger in this moment? You're not going to win the argument with the police officer. That's pretty clear. And then the other thing we do in the book is we actually try to give you a different perspective of what's occurring at the time of the stop. Importantly, this, police officers, yes, they're enforcing traffic laws, but they're also simultaneously investigating crimes. So you don't know if they have a APB out for a murder suspect, and so they may approach you in an intense manner with a heightened sense of anger or whatever, but they're also investigating crimes at the time of the encounter as well. And so if you take that into account, perhaps you can not take it so personally and not view it as a personal affront to you, but it's just a function of police work.
In the book, and we're out of time. Thanks for being with us. It's a police officer's statement, words that escalate, words to de-escalate. So it's a really practical guide with practical steps. We thank you for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
Encounters with Police, A Black Man's Guide to Survival. One of the co-authors, Eric Broyles, in studio with us. Over to you, Steve.